Well, hello everyone, and welcome to MCLE this month. My name is Bruce Richard. I'm a program attorney here at MCLE and your host for the podcast. Uh, I am lucky enough today to have Rachel Self here as our guest for the day. Rachel, rather than have me stumble through your bio, which I will be doing later on when we do the crimmigration program in July, why don't you tell the folks a little bit about yourself and your practice?
Sure. My name is Rachel Self. I'm a solo practitioner out of Boston, Massachusetts, although my practice takes me all over the country. I specialize in immigration, humanitarian deportation defense, and criminal defense work.
So, given the current times, I expect that you're probably just mostly just sitting around the house, not getting much, not having anything to do lately. So,
Yes, just twiddling my thumbs, Bruce, twiddling my thumbs. No, in all seriousness, it has been a whirlwind as an immigration practitioner since November. Immigration law is a rapidly challenging field to practice in, particularly with all of the emergency work that is coming from the detentions that we're seeing happen and the enforcement that we're seeing happen all across the country. We in Boston have seen it firsthand with the taking of Rumsaya Öztürk a few weeks ago, the Somerville Tufts, the Tufts student out of Somerville, who I'm happy to report we just learned about an hour ago she's been ordered released by the federal judge in Vermont, and that is very, very good news. And there have been slowly the cases have been trickling their ways through the court to obtain justice for a lot of people where ICE has been basically detaining first and figuring out the constitutionality of it after the fact.
right. So I know obviously for some of these more high profile cases, you're all over the country. Is that the case for most of your clients now, or is this mostly within New England?
So for me, I try to really stay focused in New England because the work is intensive enough without needing to add extensive
Nice.
travel to it. So at this point, the base of my practice is generally in the New England area, but if I'm needed elsewhere, I don't hesitate to hop a plane and go if necessary. And that's kind of the nature of the work at this time. It's just where you're needed, you go. And at this point, I've been in the Massachusetts area. I just had a case in the District of Massachusetts where the TRO was granted for a student client of mine who had had his visa revoked without any notice. He was then, due to his political beliefs, he was posted on a website, apparently placed on a list for deportation by this politically motivated website. And then ICE was at his door the next day. They did not have a lawful warrant to be there. They were banging on his door, and he did not leave his home because they did not have a warrant. And ultimately, we made an argument in the federal court under the habeas provisions that he was constructively detained by ICE. And the judge didn't necessarily buy that argument, even though we believed it to be a solid argument. But then, as soon as he left his apartment, he was detained by ICE. So we were able to go into court and get the TRO granted. He was ordered released from their custody the same day he was taken. And he was able to make his plane home that night because the crux of our argument was he was trying to leave the United States, and it appeared that ICE wanted to take him into detention for no legitimate reason other than to somehow punish him for some perceived offense that we couldn't understand.
Right. Now, I know that you said you were trying to say local. I know there were a handful of news reports mentioning that uh, when detaining, oftentimes they were just that ICE was transferring people outside of the state, uh, ignoring outside of the country. Is were you finding that with your clients as well?
Yes, it's something very common that's been happening, and it's a strategy that I believe the government employs to make it harder for people to advocate on their own behalf and harder for them to assert their constitutional protections. People get moved very quickly. It's hard to know where to file the various petitions to protect them. And as we've been seeing, they get moved, and it can sometimes be very difficult even for their attorneys to know where they are. The locator system doesn't always work well to find out where your client might be. There's something called the ICE detainee locator system, and that doesn't always get updated, and clients disappear. So that's a real challenge. And so obviously, if clients move, then you're in a different jurisdiction, you're in a different circuit, you're arguing under different law, and that can be very challenging. So when you learn a client is detained, you have to move very, very quickly to try to protect them with a habeas provision to get a TRO to ensure that they don't aren't moved from the District of Massachusetts.
Right.
If you're lucky enough to get that order, then they're supposed to keep them here in Massachusetts.
Okay. Um, so I'm gonna jump back just a little bit. So I know that you
Sure.
were you were thrust into national attention after the Martha's Vineyard migrant flights. Can you walk us through that and just sort of how you were able to mobilize support so quickly?
So I can't take sole responsibility for the support that mobilized. That was really just an extraordinary testament to the American exceptionalism that we have here in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts.
Okay.
People all were galvanized by that. People all were galvanized in the community, and everybody wanted to step in and help. In fact, it got to the point where some of the help was actually being turned away because within hours when those people landed on Martha's Vineyard, there was clothes, there were donations of food, there was donations of money. And the biggest issue that we were dealing with there was it was we don't have a large homeless shelter on the island or any place
Right.
where people could stay. So they were on blow up mattresses on the floor of the St. Andrew's Church in Edgartown with only one working bathroom, and that was very challenging for people. And so ultimately we were able to get them much better housing, much more comfortable housing over at the Joint Base on Cape Cod. And that was just temporary. They were there for a few weeks until they were set up with services here in Massachusetts, and then ultimately they were dispersed. And a lot of them also went to where they were originally trying to get to when they were lied to and induced to get on the plane. But that case was very interesting because now looking back on it from the perspective of 2025 and what we're seeing happen today, I can see it now for what it was. And from my perspective, that 2022 event was a canary in a coal mine. It was a test, whether anyone involved knew it at the time, and we
Right.
certainly but of what we would tolerate, of how much hate could be leveraged for political gain, and how human rights abuses against others would be viewed by the people of our country. And ultimately, while all of the individuals on those flights were certified as victims of a crime by both the United States Citizenship and Immigration Services and by the sheriff of Bexar County down in Texas. None of the perpetrators ever remotely faced anything like justice. They are still in power. And they learned a lesson. And the lesson was the American people would stand for this. And not only would they stand for it, there is unfortunately a segment of the population that wanted even more. And
Right.
so fast forward 2.5 years, and human beings are being sent with zero due process to what amounts to a black site or a concentration camp in El Salvador. They are literally being trafficked there by the US government, not sentenced because there is no end date on their incarceration, not deported because none of them are from there, well, except for the one guy who actually should have had the order to never be removed to El Salvador, and they sent him anyway. That's the Maryland gentleman.
Right. Yeah.
And the administration currently is essentially trafficking these people into slavery, and it's not for any legitimate purpose from my perspective. It's for clout, clicks, views, and advertising. The US government has paid the government of El Salvador $6 million for the privilege, and the Secretary of DHS, a cabinet level official, went there and made a video with her makeup perfect and her hair just so, standing in front of the inmates of a concentration camp. And this is what happens when we don't say this is not acceptable. We don't say, no, we're not going to tolerate this type of treatment of human beings in America. And it's challenging, but I have to believe, and the courts are starting to show me this, And we're about 3 months into this administration now.
Right.
And obviously, when challenges happen, legal challenges happen, they have to make their way through the court system, and that can take some time. But what we're starting to see in the news now is rulings against this behavior. As I indicated earlier, we just learned that Rimsea Öztürk has been ordered released. My client the other evening was ordered released. And so I have to believe that far more people, and I have a hope that far more people are horrified by what's happening in this country right now. But the challenge is it's hard to know how to stand up or fight back against it. So many people have become desensitized to it all and almost apathetic because it's just so easy to feel disempowered and distant from everything that's happening. You almost become numb to it because it feels too big to push back against.
Right. So if a lawyer wants to support their non-citizen clients or just simply be a better advocate, what are some of the impactful things they can start doing right away?
So I think it's really important to make sure that your clients are organized with all of their documents. If you represent non-citizen clients, you want to make sure that they are organized with all of their documents. And that includes not just immigration documents. It's important to have, your property documents set up, your wills, your trusts, your estate plan, your power of attorney, your guardianship for any children. Those types of things are important to have as well. And also to educate yourself as best as you can on your client's specific set of circumstances in their situation. We're seeing even people who we didn't believe were at any risk at all are now also being targeted, lawful permanent residents of the United States, right?
Right.
So it's not just about those without documentation. It's about anybody who is not born here at this point. But in the grand scheme of things, if we allow the constitutional protections to erode and we allow certain people's rights to be violated, it's only a question of time until starts happening to everybody, citizens and non-citizens alike.
Right.
So it's very important from my perspective, if you represent non-citizen clients, to understand what their goals are. A lot of times people want to stay in the United States, but more recently, a lot of people are choosing to say, this is not a place I want to invest a future in because it's so tenuous. So lawful permanent residents, scientists, educated professors and doctors and people, engineers, people that the best of the best who we want to have here, they're choosing to move elsewhere.
Advance your practice with the MCLE Online Pass. For one monthly subscription fee, you can access everything MCLE has online: live and on demand webcasts, ebooks, forms, checklists, and more. Start your free trial today at mcle.org/onlinepass.
So we've heard a lot of different terminology being thrown around in the news. What are some of the key categories of immigration status that every lawyer should understand, even if they're not practicing immigration law?
Absolutely. So the most important thing to understand is that no human being is illegal. Illegal is an act. Illegal is so a human being can't actually be a crime, right? And as Elie Wiesel made very clear, no human being is illegal. The proper way to refer to people who don't have documentation in this country is those without status or undocumented. And so the undocumented individual is somebody who is within the United States without status. They do not have papers, they did not enter with a visa, and they are here simply without status. So undocumented, or what a lot of people refer to as quote unquote illegal, what you hear in the news, but I object to that term. And then you have other people. You have people who are here in student status. Those are our F visa holders. You have people here that might be here for business. Those might be our L visa holders, intercompany transferees, or our H-1B visa holders. You have people who are here to work temporarily, H-2B workers. You have people that are here as lawful permanent residents who have adjusted their status to lawful permanent resident, either through marriage or through employment or through some other means. Those are called LPRs, or lawful permanent residents. And then you have naturalized US citizens. Additionally, for younger people, there is something called special immigrant juvenile status or SIJ status. And then something we've been seeing a lot in the news lately is temporary protected status or TPS holders. So those are some of the categories that are important to be familiar with and learn about. And there's an excellent program actually put on by the MCLE every year. It's a 2-day program called the Immigration Basics Plus, and we cover all of those categories in that program.
Right. I think we ran that just recently, didn't we?
I don't know if I generally in the fall.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, but it might have feel like it's recently because because time is flying by so quickly.
Um, so Rachel, of those groups you just mentioned, are any of them being targeted more specifically now than the other groups, or is this just, I mean, I'm hearing, obviously we're hearing a lot more about the students because, well, we're in New England. There's a lot of students
Mhm.
here. So is that more the result, or is this or is there a particular group that is being targeted more?
I believe the people without status, the undocumented people, are being targeted more simply because they are um, it's almost as though ICE, and the reason they're being targeted is not necessarily a lawful reason. It's just if an ICE officer comes upon somebody who might not speak the language very well, they just presume that there's somebody who might be here without status, and then the interrogation kind of devolves from there.
Right,
Uh, but really, everybody at this point is a focus and an interest of this administration.
right. On a slightly lighter note,
Yes.
say if you were at a social event and a non-lawyer friend asks you, how is work these days? What would be the one thing you would want them to know?
Uh, I would want them to know that my shield and my sword still fit just fine, but that things are very, very busy. It is a very, very busy time. It's a challenging time. But the immigration bar is a fierce bar of advocates that stand up for what they believe in and feel very strongly about human rights protections, about the Constitution, as all attorneys do, right? But the immigration bar in particular is sharp to it because we're in it every day. We're in the trenches every day. We're seeing the violations happen.
Right,
We're hearing from our clients coming from countries where they're fleeing violence and oppression, sitting in front of us and saying, "Well, I used to be a lawyer in my country before the totalitarian regime took over." And then, when you are informed with that history and you're watching certain things happen in this country, it certainly can be a triggering um issue. You say, my goodness, I mean, Venezuela was the crown jewel, the golden jewel of South America with riches and resources, and it was just a corrupt government that took over that basically made Venezuela an uninhabitable place. And the stock market crash, we're seeing so many of these things that kind of parallel what we've, as immigration advocates that do asylum work for people from countries from all over the world, we're seeing these parallels that it's almost like my dad, who's a physician, when somebody's sick or when someone goes in for a quote unquote routine operation, he always gets concerned because he says, as a doctor, I just know too much. I know how things can go sideways. I know how things can go wrong. So I think as immigration advocates, we have a familiarity with how when rights get stripped away, it can devolve and devolve very quickly. So that can be concerning. But to my colleagues who I do run into at social events and they say, my goodness, you must be busy. I just say, yes, we're very busy, but we're continuing to put one foot in front of the other, and all you can do is take it one day at a time.
right. So for folks who missed it at the start, if I know you're teaching an MCLE program this summer, the latest in crimmigration 2025. Can you give us a quick preview of what you'll be covering?
Absolutely. Yeah. And it's interesting because it's actually going to, at this point, it's going to be different than what we originally anticipated when
Right,
we planned doing the program because we've seen such an evolution of how um, people with criminal charges, just simple criminal charges, and how the Lake and Riley Act, which did pass, is affecting detention of non-citizens in this country. If you commit certain crimes, even if you're just accused, even if it's just a police report that issues, ICE can now detain you and subject you to detention and say you're not eligible for bond. So crimmigration, the days of thinking, oh, well, it's just a charge and well, we'll just work it out, that you're definitely on a radar screen now in a way that you weren't to the same level before. And also with even though Massachusetts is one of the states where there's significant protections against enforcement in courthouses and enforcement by ICE. And we are not cooperating. We do not cooperate at this point with the federal government. We had the Lunn case that basically said immigration enforcement by state officials is not lawful because that's a federal enforcement priority, not a state enforcement
Right.
priority. And so, but what we are seeing now is where for the last 4 years, there was a agreement to not be chilling people as they attend their court hearings, whether they're witnesses, victims, or defendants, and arresting them there. We are seeing a lot more arrests at courthouses. Just about a month ago, during the middle of his trial, somebody was taken away after a jury had been impaneled in Judge Somerville's courtroom at the BMC. And it was, and he was taken into ICE custody and not produced. So his Sixth Amendment rights were implicated there. And that case actually got dismissed with prejudice because ICE would not produce him to finish his trial. So there are a lot of interesting due process arguments, Sixth Amendment arguments, also with regard to being able to answer to your criminal charges in court. And if ICE takes you before you get there, how do you do that?
Right.
So, due to the changes in the Lake and Rye Act, we're seeing a lot more interest in detaining people even when there's just simple criminal charges. And
Right.
we're also seeing revocations of student visas for simple things, even such as traffic infractions. And that's being litigated throughout the courts. And there have been some TROs to reinstate these things. But ultimately, the Department of State has broad discretion to revoke visas. Those are non-reviewable in federal court, and the only way to review those revocations is to work your way through the administrative side of things in the immigration court system, and then the Board of Immigration Appeals, and then up to the First Circuit. So these are all things I think really the best advice at this point, which it should always be the advice, but we're adjusting, is, you know, if you're here on a student visa, you should not be doing anything that could get you charged criminally, right? Do your
Right.
best to behave yourself. And if you're somebody who's without status, then you obviously, know that if you do have a criminal issue and you're in court, there's a very good likelihood that you will be picked up by ICE. That's just what we're seeing.
Right. And for folks who are interested in knowing a little bit more, the latest in Crimmigration 2025 is running on July 9th. I encourage you to check out the program. Rachel, I want to thank you for joining the call. This was a lot of information that I didn't know specifically about, and I really appreciate you coming on, taking the time to chat with me today.
Absolutely. No, it's my pleasure. And I just want to make a point to let everybody know that there are still victories happening every day. And right now, with this current administration, from my perspective, the most important thing that we have is lawyers and judges and the press to be getting this stuff out here, to be fighting for these rights, to be maintaining our constitutional protections. So it's really great for attorneys that are interested in learning about this. The National Immigration Litigation Alliance. That is an organization that actually, for a very small membership fee, which is, I think it's like $125, you can get access to all their resources and materials to be able to learn how to file your own habeas petition in court for your clients, because I think it's going to become a more regular thing that we have to do, and to continue to stand up and protect everybody's rights.
Thank you. All right.
Thank you so much. Have a
Thank you so
great
much,
day.
Rachel. I
Okay,
will, you
take
too.
care. Okay,
Okay.
bye-bye.
The MCLE This Week podcast is a production of Massachusetts Continuing Legal Education in Boston, Massachusetts. For sponsorship opportunities, email us at podcast@mcle.org.